White Dog, a hard-hitting look at the evils of prejudice, an explosive genre cocktail that combines the stakes of a horror movie with the scope of a social issues drama, an underappreciated gem that went against the grain in a Hollywood that had fully embraced the blockbuster. So naturally, it was condemned by the NAACP.
Wait, what?
The film follows Julie, a struggling actor in Los Angeles, who accidentally hits a white German Shepherd with her car. After treating the dog at a vet, who informs her that unless Julie takes the dog home with her, the dog will be sent to the pound, where he will most likely be exterminated. By the way, look at this outfit. Ain't it great? Not wanting to give the dog away to the pound, Julie takes custody of the dog, and the two quickly form a bond. It's your quintessential a girl and her dog type of story, but with a twist. It turns out that the dog is a horrible racist, attacking any and all African Americans on sight. Upon discovering the dog's true nature, Julie takes the dog to Noah's Ark, a professional show animal rental business, owned by Carruthers, where the dog comes under the care of Keyes, who takes it upon himself to deprogram the dog of its racist inclinations. The film was revered by critics upon its release in France on July 7th, 1982, a whole 4 months ahead of its premiere in the United States, where it was pulled after less than a full week in theaters and shelved by Paramount without further promotion. But how did this happen? Why was a film that was explicitly made to be anti-racist condemned by the NAACP? Is there narrative dissonance between the film's intentions and execution? Is the central premise just too controversial? And am I supposed to believe that dogs are racist now? White Dog is based on a novel published in 1970 and written by French novelist Romain Gary, who is best known today for being the spouse of movie actor Jean Seberg, who is best known for a role as Patricia, the female lead in the film About des Chiffons, or Breathless, which, along with films like Hiroshima Mon Amour and The 400 Blows, which is also my review of this movie because it fucking blows, helped launch the Nouvelle Vague, a mid-20th century movement loosely comprised of writers and directors that rejected the principles of commercial French cinema for a new, fresh approach that combined postmodern art and literature with Hollywood filmmaking sensibilities. White Dog is a fictionalized memoir that follows Gary, who adopts the racist dog. But the novel serves more as a platform for Gary to express his various opinions related to the American Civil Rights Movement at the time. Gary wavers between indifference to outright hostility towards the Civil Rights Movement, and in particular its supporters. Because, as a European, he was raised in a culture with a long history of war, famine, and oppression. Any attempt to solve such suffering is a waste of time and effort, in Gary's opinion, because it's natural. Humans are made to suffer. Systemic racism? Yeah, that's natural. Gary goes out of his way to paint white American supporters of the Civil Rights Movement as phonies who only participate in performative activism, while painting African American supporters of the movement as con men who prey upon the white guilt of these performative activists for monetary capital. Seberg, who was a vocal supporter of the Civil Rights Movement and provided financial support to the Black Panthers, is portrayed as a well-intentioned but hopelessly naive movie star who's susceptible to black social climbers within her entourage. This dismissal of Seberg actually follows a pattern within Gary's greater body of work. He would often model his female characters after Seberg's personality and image, while subjecting them to cruel and humiliating treatment. This is evident in both his writing as well as the 2 films he made featuring Seberg.
I hate my wife, but I need her to make money.
The majority of Gary's opinions and sentiments can be summarized in this extended passage between himself and Seberg.
This crowd that hate around you all day long, they're the fakes, the pseudos, the talkers, professional and you know what I mean by that. People who make a living for themselves by being black and nothing else. Gary Whitey not out of hatred, revenge, or honest-to-goodness necessity, but just because they're common, traditional American crooks, hiding conveniently behind their black skins. You've got to face the fact that the black predicament and white guilt offer an ideal situation to the black status seeker. His status among the white liberals and true Democrats is entirely made up out of the lack of any status whatsoever of the black masses. All he has to do is to be a black among the well-intentioned whites. 20 million black Americans do the rest. They work for him.
So, if it wasn't obvious already, Gary was a huge piece of shit. The film rights to White Dog were purchased by Paramount Pictures in 1975, and at various points saw iterations to be directed by Roman Polanski, Arthur Penn, and Tony Scott. But it wasn't until the impending WGA and DGA strikes of 1981 that finally saw White Dog enter production under the supervision of producer John Davison, then fresh off the success of Airplane.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me...
Yeah. Shut up, Shirley. Having worked under the tutelage of B-movie king Roger Corman, Davison envisioned White Dog as a socially relevant thriller that could be made relatively quickly on a low budget. Future Academy Award winner Curtis Hanson, who was involved in a previous iteration of the source material under Robert Evans, and was also a graduate from the School of Corman, was brought on to write the script. So he is familiar with the source material, and he knew how to work quickly. Hanson was also responsible for recommending Samuel Fuller for the director's chair. Specializing in low-budget thrillers like The Steel Helmet and Shock Corridor, which combined pulp fiction with socially conscious storytelling, Fuller was an ideal choice, given the film's subject matter and the circumstances of its production. While Fuller is unknown today, I'm sorry, Sam, but it's true. His films were highly influential to a little-known film movement in the mid-20th century. You want to take a guess? The Nouvelle Vague! Fuller was particularly influential to Jean-Luc Godard, the director of Breathless? That film features explicit allusions to 40 Guns, directed by Fuller. And Godard even featured the American director in a cameo appearance in his 1965 film, Pierre Le Fou.
Well, a film is like a battleground. It's love, hate, action, violence, death. In one word, emotions.
So while Fuller is unknown today, his influence can be felt in the DNA of greater film history. Sooner or later, you start to realize that everything in the film world is connected, nothing is a coincidence, and Kevin Bacon is in fact 6 degrees. White Dog was shot over 7.5 weeks with an estimated budget of $7 million and premiered in Seattle, Washington, before it was given a trial release in Detroit, Michigan, across 5 theaters. Most Hollywood films typically have their premieres in Los Angeles and New York in order to be considered for award season and to have the major critics review the film before they receive a wider release in order to drum up word of mouth. I point this out because having your film have a trial release in Detroit, Michigan, the middle of the Midwest, is highly unusual. After less than middling returns during this initial test phase, Paramount officially pulled the film from release, with no intention of screening it further, even denying requests from the Edinburgh, Cannes, London, New York, and Telluride film festivals. The reason why Paramount turned down these offers, if you were to believe them at their word, which I certainly do not, was due to Paramount's policy that they do not participate in film festivals, except in very special and individual circumstances, on a film-by-film basis. The last attempt by Paramount to capitalize on their investment was a planned television premiere on NBC in January of 1984, which was met with strong criticism from the NAACP. We are against the whole thrust of the film and what it says about racism. Now, to be fair to Paramount Pictures, a corporation whose main objective is to make money, pulling a film with negative publicity that only cost $7 million to make is a no-brainer. We see this same strategy employed by studio executives to this day. Paramount had an extremely good run of films in the 1980s, which up to this point included American Gigolo, Little Darlings, Urban Cowboy, Airplane, Ordinary People, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Reds, The Wrath of Khan, An Officer and a Gentleman, 48 Hours, as well as the first 3 entries in the Friday the 13th franchise. All of which to say that Paramount could afford to dump a movie or two at this point of time. Given the film's central premise, racist dog that attacks black people, it's amazing that the film got made at all. But a movie is not solely about its subject matter on its own merits. It's about the perspective with which the film chooses to frame their subject. To paraphrase Roger Ebert, a film is not what it is about, it's how it goes about it. This is how you're able to have a film that centers on Hideki Tojo, Prime Minister of Imperial Japan from 1941 to 1944, and the architect of the Pacific Theater, during which time Japan committed many war crimes as a Christ-like martyr. Now, I'm sure I lost a lot of you at the very beginning of this video. I'm also sure I lost a lot of you with that previous bombshell. But to those of you who have been wondering this whole time, wait, a dog can be racist? What has this world come to? Yes, dogs can be racist, and the world has always been this way. Michael, you stupid son of a bitch. The origins of dogs being trained to attack people of African descent can be traced back to the era of chattel slavery, where they were used to hunt down runaway slaves and attack the indigenous populations of the Americas. From there, they evolved into the modern canine unit. While they were not formally introduced until the year 1957 by the city of Baltimore, police forces within the southern United States had been informally using white dogs even after the Emancipation Proclamation. The true intentions of police dogs became abundantly clear when the Birmingham Police Department used canine units against peaceful black protesters during the Civil Rights Movement. The Journal of Forensic and Legal Medicine had found that from 2005 to 2013, canine units had sent 32,951 people into emergency care, with 42% of victims being African American men. The connection between white dogs being used as a tool for police brutality is even briefly alluded to in the film.
He's going to attack and kill black people!
That's crazy. I don't believe that.
What the hell you mean, huh? You see this scar, lady? You see this goddamn scar? Well, I got that when I was 14 years old. A white dog did it.
But this reference is vague enough that an audience wouldn't be able to understand the connection unless they were already familiar with the history of the subject matter. Now, I'm not asking Joe, that's his character's name by the way, to paint a vivid portrait of his experiences for the audience, or insinuating that the film would be better for its inclusion. But you know who does get a scene like this? Carruthers.
Good friend of mine had a German Shepherd for 8 years. Lived with him, slept with him, hunted and fished with him, did everything with him. Then one night that dog turned and chewed my friend's jugular out. That dog was an old attack dog.
This highlights a problem with both the film and its source material. It prioritizes the white perspective. While the narrative shifts between Julie and Keyes, Julie, a white woman, is the primary protagonist. She is the first character we meet. We follow her emotional journey of discovering the dog, gaining affection for the dog, learning that the dog is racist, and setting into motion the events that take up the rest of the film. She is the audience's entry point into the story, she has the most agency in the story, and we empathize with her conflict, because she cares about the dog. I also love dogs, therefore invested. Look at that big beautiful boy! Look at the baby! Look at him. Look at that vile, monstrous, horribly racist dog! Oh no! Oh god! This prioritizing of the white perspective is also found in the film's production. Producer John Davison, co-writer Curtis Hanson, director Samuel Fuller, and source author Roman Gary are all white. And it's not like Hollywood was lacking in black talent at this time. Melvin Von Peebles, Gordon Parks, Charles Burnett, Sidney Poitier, Michael Schultz. If you could get Sam Fuller to direct this movie, then you could have gotten them as well. It's not like Sam was a big talent name at the time, and in fact, Hanson explicitly suggested Fuller because he knew that the director needed a job.
What I didn't say to Don, but that I, of course, knew, was that Sammy needed a job, and I thought would love this opportunity.
It's nepotism. It's always nepotism. Paramount's head of production, Jeffrey Katzenberg, Davison, and actor Paul Winfield, who plays the role of Keyes, did make an effort to include the involvement of the NAACP during the film's production. Willis Edwards, who is often cited by sources as the president of the organization's Hollywood Bureau, provided feedback on the film's script, noting that audiences could potentially misinterpret the film's messaging and suggested completely eliminating the racial aspect of the story entirely. Edwards even visited the set of White Dog during filming, which Fuller did not appreciate.
Willis Edwards showed up on our set one day to see if our film was distorting the image of black people. I was flabbergasted. Why hadn't an organization as prestigious as the NAACP done their homework and checked out my record before sending a man to spy on my work? I was one of the first directors in Hollywood to use actors of color in intelligent, complex roles.
Since the bulk of Fuller's career was the 50s and early 60s, these complex and intelligent roles included the Black Klansman trope.
Witness number 2, Trent.
Keep our schools white.
Keep them white. That's right. Keep them white.
I'm against Catholics.
Hallelujah, man. Hallelujah.
Against Jews.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Against
Hallelujah.
There's one. Let's get that black boy before he marries my daughter.
Hallelujah.
I was deeply offended by this intrusion, and I told John Davison in no uncertain terms that I didn't want this Mr. Edwards on my set. Davison agreed with me completely and asked the NAACP man to leave.
So when critics write about the film being condemned by the NAACP, this is what they are referring to. Not Fuller's response, mind you, just the fact that the NAACP provided constructive criticism, without highlighting the context that Paramount invited the organization to be involved in the film's production. Now, because the NAACP was ultimately denied input by Fuller, the film has a uniquely white perspective on what causes the proliferation of racism.
What I loved about the possibility of White Dog was the metaphor, and showing man's best friend can be polluted by racism, and showing that racism, in fact, is not a natural thing, but is a taught thing. And what better metaphor for that than teaching man's best friend?
This theme is personified by a character we meet near the end of the film. The dog's previous owner, a grandfather with his 2 grandchildren.
Did you train him?
I sure did, since he was just a puppy.
To be a white dog?
And the best of the lot.
Now, there's a big and obvious flaw with this framing. Racism is not a character flaw exclusive to those who hold racist beliefs. It's a wider, systemic issue. Racial discrimination is an immediate and visible manifestation of an underlying racial policy. When someone discriminates against a person in a racial group, they are carrying out racial policy, or taking advantage of the lack of a protective policy. We all have the power to discriminate, only an exclusive few have the power to make policy. Despite what the film might suggest, the reason why racism still exists in modern society is because there are people in power who benefit from the exploitation and disenfranchisement of BIPOC groups. Even though the film is centered around racism, the concept of race is almost entirely ignored. No characters discuss race in relation to themselves, nor does Julie interrogate her relationship with race and how her affection for the dog might be in conflict with her sense of morality. That's actually a point that Curtis Hanson purposefully ignored when writing the script.
I also very much like the idea of having the lead human, this young actress, be someone who's not terribly concerned about racism, not somebody who even thinks about it. It's not part of her daily existence. But what happens is, through the accident of hitting this dog with her car, she adopts it and then falls in love, in a sense, with the dog. And then she wants to cure the dog. It's not that she's an activist wanting to attack racism, but she wants to cure the dog because she loves the dog and doesn't want it to be put to sleep.
Which was a stupid decision, because that would have added a whole nother layer of conflict and characterization for Julie. You could be interested in civil rights and love dogs, Curtis. They're not mutually exclusive.
¿Por qué no los dos?
This dusty and crusty old man is also the only depiction of a racist human character within the text of the film. Any racism experienced by BIPOC characters is framed as something that happened to them off-screen in the past, outside of the current events. The message to the audience is that racism is an old, dying ideology found within a few bad apples living in trailer parks. Because the film is told through a white perspective and is using a hyper-individualized definition of racism, the African-American characters within the film are all victims of tokenization. They're either attacked by the dog or in danger of being attacked by the dog. Take this scene, for example. Now, credit where credit is due. This is a very well-made scene. It subtly creates suspense in the true Hitchcockian fashion. Each and every character within the frame lacks critical information that the audience is well aware of. But what is that crucial nugget of information that keeps the audience in suspense? Is it the dog's presence? No, the dog's presence in and of itself is not worthy of suspense. It's the race of the human characters. Oh no, they're black! Ah! Outside of their function within the narrative, the African-American characters lack complexity and agency. While Keyes is a more fleshed out character, his presence is predicated on how his race creates a dynamic conflict between himself and the dog. If Keyes wasn't black, you would lose the imagery of a black man fighting against the metaphorical embodiment of racism in a setting that was intentionally meant to invoke the imagery of gladiators.
When Sammy started talking about this movie, he said, yeah, and the dog and the man, and they're like gladiators. And an image obviously was conjured in his mind of a big cage where gladiatorial combat between man and dog could be staged.
Round one, fight!
And despite Keyes being an animal anthropologist, his interests seem to be exclusive to the topic of white dogs, hinting that he has pursued this research in the past and intends to continue pursuing it in the future. Keyes' role is unique because he is meant to be the moral authority of the film. Carruthers defers to Keyes in the treatment of the dog, backing him up when Julie protests and hyping him up with matters outside of the dog.
That's impossible. Mr. Keyes is swamped. He's breaking in a load of wild animals. He's working leopards and jaguars for 2 features, and he's taming 4 crazy chimps for a movie of the week.
The visual language of the film supports his authority by giving him empowering, dynamic angles, and even this weird introduction shot. I wonder who that is. Who's that guy? I have no idea who that guy is. Keyes is also the most knowledgeable character in the film. He is college educated.
Keyes drives a Mercedes-Benz while his classmates teach his grammar to little knotheads.
He comes from an academic family.
Keyes was suckled on anthropology. His mother teaches it, and his father writes about it.
He acts as Julie's, and by extension, the audience's gateway into the concept of white dogs.
How can someone turn a dog into a racist?
Well, over 100 years ago, they raised dogs to catch runaway slaves. Then they progressed to track down runaway black convicts.
Not only does the text of the film portray Keyes as the moral authority, according to producer John Davison, as well as co-writer Curtis Hanson, the character that director Samuel Fuller paid the most attention to and had the most fondness for was Keyes.
Sammy loved the capacity that people have to learn and improve themselves. And he loved people that took on the responsibility of trying to guide and help people. And I think Sammy was drawn to the character of the dog trainer, of Keys, because he saw in him the possibility of having a man be at the center of this racial question, who was a scientist and also a teacher, who would, in a sense, cure this dog by re-teaching.
You see, Julie, I'd like to develop a foolproof method of reconditioning so that anyone, anywhere within a matter of weeks will be able to eradicate that racist poisoning permanently. Maybe that way, that'll stop bigots from investing hate and time into dogs like yours.
But because Keys is supposed to be the moral authority, this leads to unintended consequences in the film's messaging. Halfway through the film's runtime, the dog escapes Noah's Ark and kills a man in a church in what is easily the most horrifying scene. Keys is able to recapture the dog and discovers what has happened. However, he does not inform the authorities of this incident and continues with his treatment.
I want to break you. I'm not through with you yet.
Now, it should go without question that all cops are bad. But in this particular instance, because we lack the proper social structures, it is a moral imperative that you report what happened to the police. A man died because of Keys. A man who presumably had family, friends, colleagues, maybe even children. Not that we get any insight into that. The reason why Keys doesn't report this incident is because he is this close to perfecting his technique.
Because there's still a chance to cure him.
Cure him?
His logic being that killing the dog won't bring them or anyone else any closer to solving the problem of the proliferation of racism.
He just killed a man. There is no way you can cure that dog. I want you to shoot him now before he kills more blacks.
So you finally joined the club. A club of horrified people who raise holy hell about that disease, that racist hate, but do absolutely nothing to stamp it out. That dog is the only weapon we have, at least, to remove a part of it.
Which is an absolutely buck-wild piece of mental gymnastics that only works within the hyper-specific context of this film. And even by his own admission, Keys will just get another dog if this iteration of the experiment fails.
I'll get another white dog, and another, or another, or another, and another, and keep on working till I lick it. Because that's the only way to stop sick people from breeding sick dogs.
Now, if Keys was supposed to be an anti-hero, a character whose pursuit of long-term goals blinds him to the immediate circumstances and people surrounding him, this would add another layer of interest to the central conflict. But because Keys is meant to be the moral authority of the film, his decision to continue the treatment is a reflection of the film's white supremacist values instead of a character flaw. The film ends with the dog seemingly cured of its racist inclinations, but thanks to the effects of the treatment, the dog's brain has become so scrambled that it views everyone as a threat. The dog attacks Carruthers, leading Keys to finally put down the animal. So it's okay for the dog to be a racist, bloodthirsty psychopath, but a regular, bloodthirsty psychopath? Now that's just too much. The messaging of the film, however unintentional, is that black lives are of lesser value to white lives. Ultimately, White Dog fails because it uses race for aesthetic purposes and is uninterested in examining the topic in a deeper, introspective level. So the NAACP was absolutely correct to be wary of the film's treatment of racism and African American characters. But here's the thing, I don't believe that the NAACP's response to the film was what got it pulled from theaters. That didn't stop movies like Soul Man.
Congratulations, Mr. Watson.
Thank you, sir. I'll do my best.
Some people will do anything to get into Harvard.
I'd like you to meet my good friend, Kareem Abdul-Ali.
That film made $27 million.
These are the 80s, man. It's the Cosby decade.
Oh, double no.
Mom, Dad, I'm black.
What?
Soul Man. He didn't give up. He got down.
The reason why White Dog got pulled from theaters, in my opinion, was because it wasn't racist enough. Under the direction of President of Paramount, Michael Eisner, the film was envisioned as Jaws on pause, with the imperative that the film never overtly address through attitude or statement the issue of racism per se. Also, as mentioned by John Davison and Curtis Hanson, the film faced numerous feedback suggestions from the higher-ups at Paramount.
But there was this specter of notes and the specter of a company that was soliciting notes that sort of hung over the latter part of the production.
They didn't like Sam's long tracking shots. They wanted them eliminated or shortened. They didn't like intercutting of the animal eyes and the human eyes. They didn't like extreme close-ups. They didn't like dog POVs because they were, by necessity, low angles. They just didn't like anything that was stylish.
So apparently, the executives didn't like good filmmaking. It also did not help that Samuel Fuller wouldn't play ball with the executives.
Sammy's not one to take notes lightly. Sammy's reaction to somebody saying that they had an idea was, "That's a great idea, you should use it when you make your movie."
And the only thing that really saved Sam was the fact that he didn't do a lot of coverage. And he couldn't eliminate all this stuff and still have the picture make sense.
So, I'm calling it here. White Dog was not shelved because the NAACP thought it was racist. It was pulled from release because it wasn't racist in the way that Michael Eisner wanted. Because despite all the problems the film has, it is willing to examine the subject of racism in explicit terms without dog whistles, and show how ugly it can truly be. You don't release a film like White Dog in 5 theaters outside of Los Angeles and New York with the expectation that it will be successful. That is something you do when you want a film to fail. Under the care of Fuller and Company, we got the best possible iteration of the story we could have gotten given the circumstances. And despite my criticisms of the film, I genuinely believe that White Dog was made with the best intentions by everyone immediately involved in its production. But the same can also be said of Uncle Tom's Cabin. Published in 1852 and written by Harriet Beecher Stowe, herself an abolitionist, the novel was meant to be an indictment against the evils of chattel slavery and sought to accurately portray the African American experience. Despite these noble intentions, Uncle Tom's Cabin is best known today for proliferating such racist stereotypes as the happy darky, the tragic mulatto, the mammy, the pickaninny, and of course, the Uncle Tom. The novel is also partially responsible for popularizing the arts of minstrelsy and blackface. Harriet Beecher Stowe? More like Harriet Beecher Stool! All stories have a desired interpretation because all stories are the communication of morals through metaphor. Nuclear holocaust is bad. Old man can't be old man in modern world. If you have sex before marriage, you'll die a violent death. But what an audience takes away from a creative work is completely dependent on that audience's cultural values. If the audience lives in a culture that values white lives over the lives of people of color, then the creative work produced in that culture will implicitly reflect those values regardless of intent. So media gatekeepers within a white supremacist society need to make an intentional effort to be inclusive of non-white perspectives in order to combat white supremacy in media. Without an organized resistance movement that focuses on the role of mass media in the perpetuation and maintenance of white supremacy, nothing will change. Challenging mass media to divest of white supremacy should be the starting point of a renowned movement for racial justice. Alright, done. That was a heavy one, wasn't it? If you are still watching this video, then thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you watching. I hope you have a lovely day, and I hope to see you again in the future.